West du har min freon and welcome to another video. Well, my friends, it seems that finally we've got some new information on the Lord of the Rings Gollum video game, which will be released on computers and also on major video game consoles. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I made a video about another Lord of the Rings video game, which will be released on telephones, and not many people were excited about that, because quite obviously it is much better to play a game on a console or a computer. Now, it seems that we've also got the release date and some more information about the actual gameplay. So let us dive into the article and then I shall provide you with my take on it. The Lord of the Rings Gollum finally has a release date. We're almost there, my precious. Daedalic Entertainment has announced that The Lord of the Rings Gollum will release this September. The upcoming story-focused stealth game will be available on PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One and Xbox Series X as on September the 1st. A Nintendo Switch version is also planned and should release later in 2022. Playing as Gollum, you'll explore Middle-earth in a time just before the Fellowship of the Ring, hunting for the one ring that you lost to Bilbo Baggins while attempting to stay out of the clutches of the Dark Lord Sauron. Familiar faces are promised, as well as a system in which you must decide which of the characters' dual personalities gets the upper hand in important decisions, either Gollum or Smeagol. The Lord of the Rings Gollum was first announced in 2019 and was set for a 2021 release, but was later delayed to 2022. Based on the Tolkien books, rather than the Peter Jackson movies, developer Daedalic promises a Prince of Persia-like stealth game with a branching narrative. We recently saw 20 minutes of gameplay footage, and you can find out what we thought in our Gollum hands-off preview. So that's the release date. It's going to be released September the 1st, 2022, just a day before the upcoming atrocity from Amazon, The Rings of Power. And now we shall look at what they've got to say about that. They saw the gameplay. The Lord of the Rings Gollum is looking less than precious. The store hobbit Smeagol, corrupted into the twisted form of Gollum by the One Ring, is not the most obvious protagonist for a video game, but there is potential for the dual personalities of the Lord of the Rings' sneakiest character to translate into fun gameplay. A battle between cowardice and vindictiveness, fought within the very mind of your playable character, could spin off into challenging choices and unique mechanics. Sadly, it looks as if the upcoming The Lord of the Rings Gollum from developer Daedalic Entertainment is struggling to find such an entrancing angle. During a recent hands-off presentation, I was shown just over 20 minutes of beta gameplay footage from The Lord of the Rings Gollum. This was split across two Middle-earth locations: Cirith Ungol, the path that runs through the mountains of Mordor and acts as a stage for the game's first chapter, and Thranduil, the Elven King's woodland realm. While Gollum is inspired by the books rather than the movies, these locations draw from more or less the same palette used for Peter Jackson's fantasy epic, and so are instantly recognizable. Taking place just a few years before the Fellowship of the Ring, the story sees Gollum desperately searching for his precious ring while attempting to stay out of Sauron's clutches. The scenario forms the framework of a stealth game in which you must avoid fights at all costs, lest you find yourself captured by the Dark Lord servants. Gollum is a linear game made up of what Daedalic says are mostly confined environments explored through a combination of stealth and climbing. While frequent use of both are required, there are sequences in which you can opt for your preferred approach. A pathway patrolled by enemies, for instance, may have a sneaking route for you to follow among the shadows, allowing you to wait unseen for orcs to pass before moving into the next concealing patch of shrubbery. But that same path may also have walls covered in handholds that allow you to scale over and around those same enemies. As Gollum is completely outmatched in strength by even the lowliest orc, combat is entirely out of the question. Enemies that block your path must be dispatched with sneakier methods. The example from the presentation showed Gollum throwing a rock at a lamp to distract an orc, causing them to fall into a pit and be eaten by resident giant arachnid Shelob. This was clearly a scripted tutorial event, but hopefully later levels allow inventive and freedom use of distractions and traps. While Gollum can't fight, he can murder via the time-honored tradition of stealth takedowns. By strangling unaware enemies drains your stamina meter, and if you don't have enough endurance to finish the job, then it's game over. Daedalic explains that there is some leeway to escape enemies should they spot you, but being very close to alerted foes will result in them capturing you. This adds a substantial amount of risk to takedowns, but it does raise concerns about how prevalent instant fail stealth will be across the entire game. Thankfully, Gollum doesn't always need to get close to enemies, as sometimes he can simply clamber past them. Rather than the climb anything design of games like Zelda, Breath of the Wild and recent Assassin's Creed, Gollum uses predetermined paths through the environment. That's not inherently a bad thing. It's arguably better suited to the somewhat puzzle adventure vibe Gollum is seemingly going for. But the visual design of the paths shown in the demonstration was, simply put, ugly. Among the gloomy rock faces of the Mordor mountains were perfect, highly visible lines for Gollum to shimmy along. Vertical roots were covered in climbing vines that hung unnaturally like thick carpets. Rock formations in the woodland realm had strangely flat surfaces and rounded edges instead of naturally craggy finishes, which made the caverns look weirdly manufactured. Only reinforcing that feeling were the many routes that had arrows painted on the surface to indicate direction of travel, which seems entirely out of place in Tolkien's world. Could this not have been scrawlings in black speech akin to how God of War uses runes on its own climbing paths? Never mind, the War for the Ring. It seems as if there's a war between environment and level design. There's also a struggle to make the world distinct from the most famous Lord of the Rings adaptation. Gollum mostly looks and sounds like the Andy Serkis version from the movie, save for his shock of black hair, with each side of his dual personality having similar vocal and movement traits. It makes the performance seem a bit like an impression rather than a fresh interpretation of the book. The two personalities of Gollum and Smeagol become a gameplay mechanic during conflict movements, scenarios in which they argue you must pick a side. The example provided in the demonstration featured Smeagol wishing to befriend a beetle, while Gollum, who suspected it of being Sauron's spy, insisted on squashing it. It was a pretty underwhelming moment, but hopefully these sequences provide a stage for much more dramatic choices as the story unfolds. Daedalic promises that these choices will change the outcome of situations, affect how others perceive Gollum, and even dictate the fates of certain characters. There's definitely some BioWare-ish potential in those choices, but I'm left a little puzzled as to why the Lord of the Rings Gollum doesn't appear to be doing more with the concept. I can envision a game in which opting for Smeagol choices enhances your climbing skills, providing more options that suit that conflict-adverse side of the character, while choosing to focus on the Gollum personality buffs your stealth toolkit. But there are no unlockable skills. Daedalic confirmed that Gollum has all of his abilities from the start of the game. With no ability-based character development across the span of the game, level design will have to be incredibly varied and inventive to continually offer engaging challenges and a sense of progression. But even the Elven King's Hall segment of the presentation taken from halfway through the game seemed to be made up of little more than climbing ledges and pillars with no real need for overcoming obstructions. Some climbing surfaces do require stamina management to traverse, but that didn't appear to offer any significant challenge. I'm left with the impression of a game that will simply ask us to move from A to B down linear pathways without much opportunity for experimentation or expression. Hopefully, that's not the case. Hopefully both segments of the game shown in the presentation are just poor examples of what Daedalic has crafted, or perhaps Gollum's strengths simply don't lie in what was shown. It does draw from one of the deepest wells of fantasy lore in existence, after all, so perhaps the story with complex choices is actually hiding behind this dull slice of gameplay. But for now, I'm left with the underwhelming impression of a simple game that would have landed better in the era when Peter Jackson's trilogy was still in cinemas than it will in 2022. We'll see if that feeling is right when The Lord of the Rings Gollum releases on PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series XS on September the 1st. Though, my friends, Well, I've got a couple of things to say about that. Firstly, I'm not that much of a gamer. I play about one video game a year, and this year it is The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, which I've finally got into playing, and I'm enjoying it more than enough. And secondly, it is of course up to you. I personally prefer open world RPGs of the type of The Witcher or Skyrim, Elder Scrolls, and things like that. But this game, it seems to me, will be more relaxing, which are games that I also enjoy. Just as the guy here said, get from point A to point B. And what I consider to be a plus and an advantage is that it is indeed going to be some sort of a combination between an adaptation of Tolkien's books and the films by Peter Jackson. So nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the upcoming atrocity from Amazon, and that is quite enough for me. I will post some links in the description down below so you can check out these trailers and the pictures for yourselves. I don't want to get a copyright strike, so I shall not be playing the this trailer here. Let me know in the comments down below if you are going to get the game, if you're looking forward to it, and what kind of games you like to play anyway. And that will be all. Thank you very much for watching, my friends, and namaste.